It is Friday. Wow, the 9th of May, 2025. Friday. Just okay. So, Northern Perspective. I was looking for them. No, this is from Canadian Taxpayer Federation. Taxpayers tell MPs to defund the CBC. Taxpayer podcast. So, the CTF, Canadian Tax Federation, was summoned to testify at the Heritage Committee on Parliament Hill in Ottawa. The topic was the CBC. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation told the committee full of politicians that it was time to defund the CBC for three key reasons. The CBC costs Canadians too much money, nearly nobody is watching it, and journalists should not be paid by the government. Most of the MPs were not happy to see us, but there were a lot that were. So you'll see it. I'm going to show the whole thing. I think it's really important to get a record of this in case these channels get targeted or removed. At least there's like another place you can take a look. Anyway, so this was very interesting. I also obviously agree. I've been saying this for many years. That the CBC should be defunded from the government, state funded, because first of all, everything that she said and beyond that, there's a lack of trust because they have not been transparent. They have deceived people. They have absolutely engineered psychological operations, whether they realize it or not, and shaped people's worldviews in a very, very incorrect way. And we saw that through COVID, right? And so CTV News in the morning or whatever it was, CTV Ottawa, like all of everyone there should be fired that were reporting, especially during COVID. But yeah, so, and then if they do well and start reporting the truth, and people like Rosemary Barton and David Cochrane and Peter Mansbridge actually have people on that that have a more well-rounded view and interpretation of what's going on in Canada and internationally, maybe that would help. But at this point, they're not saying that they should just be completely, eliminated. Obviously, they can make their own money, though. I don't get paid for what I do, especially not by the government. And yeah, and in fact, it costs me money to share this information because, like I said, I think it's really important. I'm trying to get the truth out there. And at this point, when I was talking to Viva yesterday, you can't see me just because, again, it's early in the morning and I didn't prepare for this to be on screen. But the last 2 years, but especially after what happened in Israel and Palestine, despite the fact that I was saying that, like, I think this is very much in a gray area, and I was specifically saying people within the government and that are working with them, media, etc. There are people involved, and not just from Israel, but also people all over the world, including the USA and Canada, that are involved in a lot of things that are happening where there's crimes against humanity that are being committed and war crimes, right? And so these are serious, and people are not getting held accountable for that. And people, for example, like Netanyahu, that got us into a war in Afghanistan, and he was lying to Congress in 2002 about weapons of mass destruction in the Iraq. And we know now, well, people in my network and myself, again, it's a small community, like I said, and it's even smaller for people that are tracking a lot of the different things that have happened regarding drug wars, fueling ground wars, whatever you want to call it, and where there have been CIA involvement, even in Ukraine, CIA backed coups. Same thing in Africa. We've talked about this before, and in Cuba, and in the Middle East, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I would love to unpack that more and talk about the Freedom Convoy and how I think that it was it was well before the Freedom Convoy actually happened that people were planting seeds and radicalizing people, or attempting to, and within so many different groups and networks on WhatsApp, on Signal, on Telegram, so many different other ways, obviously through meetings with people, barnyard meetings, for example, and so many other ways that people were communicating with people. But there were people, unfortunately, that should have been doing the opposite of what they were doing, like the Ray Epps types, that were instead being instigators and trying to radicalize people, and or lie about conversations they were having, like I was saying before. And then this again just is where they took that, and it was hijacked because people were trying to say that these were right-wing extremists and people trying to murder government people. Again, like, this was so much misinformation being spread, and people during that time as well were accusing Jeremy McKenzie of being a right-wing extremist, part of a terrorist organization, domestic terrorist, all seditionist, anyone that was part of the peaceful protest or even donated to the GoFundMe, which was ridiculous because it was people from within the government in so many different levels. Like even, for example, the Toronto 18, if you look at the person that from CSIS that I had mentioned before, he was deeply involved with like different groups through CSIS. And again, CSIS is a great organization, but again, they have been failing Canada hard. And there have been so many different people, including myself, that have reached out to them trying to give information, but it's being shut down. And I'm not saying it's shut down at the middle level. I'm saying there's people at the top of these organizations that are woke DEI hires, like Brenda Lucky, like I've said before, and Jenny Carignan, and Harjit Saint-Jean. He was a friggin' reserve lieutenant colonel or whatever he was. He got to be appointed by Trudeau as the Minister of National Defense when you had people like Andrew. I just couldn't believe it. And so many people within the community were also very disappointed. So again, people within cabinet and the House of Commons and these banker Bilderberg people that they operate with, they are really, really not helping. Anyway, and so even with Brenda Lucky, people within my network, again, these were not like private conversations we were having that we couldn't have with the public. People are telling me things just based on their assessment of her, right? Just saying like they didn't like her. She wasn't doing a good job. It wasn't deserved. People were telling me that there was other people that should have been the head of the RCMP, and they were completely overlooked, even despite the fact that these men were heroes and of service and dedicated and did hard jobs on the friggin' ground. And these people were overlooked, and now either retired or resigned or whatever, because this was a complete disappointment to so many different people. And even with so many people that I've talked about before, there were generals that were the CDSs, and we had the best of the best, and we had the option to select from the best of the best. And so we had people on the table like JD Vance, who was incredible, of service, etc. And people, again, this woke stuff, people like came after him hard with what they were saying about him and Major General Fortin and Cadieux. And these people were booted out, and then they finally found someone that was just gonna toe the party line, whatever you want to call it, and he put out Can 4 Gens, and they were very extreme, and again, like these are the first mandates or Can 4 Gens that were put out and then adopted by the government, and then people from other government organizations like the RCMP and LP, like these people were looking at these Can 4 Gens for the military in order to look at how to also make policies and things like that for the people within their organizations. And the reason why this was important is because I was providing templated memorandums to so many different people that were getting segregated. And so with the military, I wanted to talk more about that because there were people that were kicked out eventually, but when they were segregated and told not to like be in like the workplace and stuff like that because they were not vaccinated, these people were still getting paid. And that's a good thing. And so Helen Bruce, she was suspended and charged. Viva was saying it was the 4th of February. I've been told from people in my network that I work with and that have worked with her closely that she was suspended and charged on the 20, like that first weekend of the Freedom Convoy. Or it could have very well been just people saying that it was on the table, and then it took a couple of days for it to actually be processed and finalized. So again, we get information in advance of things actually happening. And so, because even during that time, I was saying that my phones were possibly, or I was told that my phones possibly could be wiretapped because of the community I was in, because other people were having their phones tapped. Anyways, and some people illegally, complete overreach and without warrants and all of this stuff, absolutely ridiculous. And I was freely giving this information anyways, ladies and gentlemen. I was emailing I was emailing OPS, I was emailing OPP, RCMP, like all of these organizations, every member of the House of Commons basically, but especially the cabinet members. I emailed every single one of them repeatedly, and I've shared that on my videos. And so anyway, just a lot of stuff that I wasn't even remembering from COVID days, just because since then it's been the Russia-Ukraine war that got me extremely busy. And then there were still people that were working in and around Afghanistan to get people out that were helping us overseas. Oh my God. And then obviously what happened on October 7th and things that happened after that. Again, it's been quite busy. And so, and people have seen my video. So Ukraine, I was talking about the Ghost of Kiev. I was saying that that was friggin' a video game or whatever. I was like, what are you talking about? And I'm saying this is propaganda that Ukraine knowingly pays for, and they have social media influencers as well, and they try to influence the narrative not only for people within Ukraine to promote the war and to get more people to enroll and apply or whatever, but it's also to get support from other countries, right? But it was a lie, and within the industry, you become aware of it when anyway. And the Snake Island, people were saying that Ukrainian soldiers died by Russians. Again, I was saying that that's a friggin' lie. Here they are, alive and well, and immediately. And people, we don't have a lot of time with this stuff, and so people within my network, this is how it gets out to journalists and reporters, like I've said before. But we like when we like there's oh my God, there's people all over the freaking. But when these things happen, like if it's a false flag or a lie, and it's a big one, and it's enough where people are going to get involved in a friggin' war and possibly escalate to World War III, it's important to get this information out there. I hope I'm making sense. And so, yeah, instead of further radicalizing, people are saying like, no, if you're going to go to Ukraine and support, look at this. And the rape allegations were deemed to be false. That's why the spokeswoman that had talked about that early on in the war, she was fired. There were so many people, even several months later, from the friggin' Ukrainian government. I'm talking about the friggin' people that live like their government body, right? Like the cabinet, their House of Commons equivalent, whatever it is, whatever their Senate equivalent is. These were the people that were ruining it, and misleading people. And so a lot of people got fired because of corruption and money laundering and stealing, money. And Zelensky too, with two of his friends that were brothers. Like that whole yacht incident with the $73 million that they were trying to take. Well, they did from taxpayers, essentially. So anyways, I'm talking a lot about taxpayers. Long story longer. Oh my God. I do want to share this video. It's very well done. And yeah, this woman, Chris Sims, she's great. Great.
We're talking about the behemoth that is the CBC, no, $1.4 billion. And just to be clear, you're whittling it down to this tiny little keyhole of getting emergency information to people in the north?
You said you just disagree with all.
Order, please.
The media.
The time is up, Mr. Cotto.
You're listening to the Canadian Taxpayers Podcast. I'm your federal director here in Mordor, a.k.a. the Swamp of the North, a.k.a. Ottawa. My name is Franco Terrazzano, the CTF's federal director, and I'm joined by my colleague and friend, our Alberta director, Chris Sims. Chris is in Lethbridge right now, Lethbridge, Alberta, but she was just in Ottawa in the belly of the beast at a parliamentary committee to defund the CBC. That's right. Chris walked into this committee on Parliament Hill, calling on the government to defund the CBC. And boy, oh boy, did the fireworks fly during committee. Now, folks, we're going to play for you the entire committee appearance from Chris calling on the government to defund the CBC. But I want to give you a little taste of what that committee appearance was like and some of the back and forth that happened. So just check out this little teaser.
I can repeat my question. I was asking for your opinion on media outlets with which you work regularly. It's online. It's for everyone to see, True North and Rebel News and others. So my question is, do you consider these outlets as reliable in terms of independent information, quality information, compared to what's being put out by traditional outlets such as CBC, Global News, and CTV, for instance?
A short answer, please.
Sorry, ma'am, through the chair. I think that is a personal opinion. I have worked with outstanding journalists from all outlets, actually. So it doesn't matter if it's True North or Rebel or Western Standard, or in fact, the CBC or CTV.
My mic was off. I'm not going to keep cutting this off, but I will say that there are people within certain independent news outlets that are really good people, and they're doing really good work. And Robert Krychek, for example, I've mentioned him before, and we've communicated back and forth on Signal. And I give him my business card when he was at the Helen Gruss hearings, the first ones. I was there in support of her, and he was there reporting on it, and I thought that was really important. And I think that was in 2022. or 2023 is when it started. Oh my God. No, I think it was 2022. Oh no, with the court proceedings themselves, it took a while for her to get in. Anyways, this was a few years that she was doing this. I'll have to ask her again. So many freaking details are just all over the place. But yeah, he was reporting on a lot of good stuff. But unfortunately, there are people in Rebel News that are making it look bad, or they're also spreading misinformation, whether they realize it or not. And I mean that respectfully. People like Ezra Levant and others, I've tried to hold them to account with information that they've been sharing, especially with a biased lens. But yeah, anyways, long story longer.
TV or global. So it's been both.
And if anyone from Viva Fry, that his staff is listening, there are people that I know that are still in the courts, unfortunately, that were in government that got kicked out. Like my friend, she was pregnant, her first pregnancy, and it was a high risk one because she was she was close to 40 at the time. And she was kicked out while pregnant because she didn't get vaccinated because she was concerned that this would harm her child. And the fact that she wasn't able to have that right, and she had served Canada as an army officer for over 20 years at that point. And so that's one example of many people that were trying to be change agents and just provide truth. She wasn't being controversial at all. She was being very professional, and she was giving, just like Helen Gruce, a lot of medical, scientific, and government data that she thought that was very important that people needed to get. And again, knowing the risks with that, but still finding it necessary, being of service to Canada and her friggin' troops, and so many people got kicked out. And it's not, and people that were high up in the fire departments as well, and nurses and medics and doctors, you name it. And so these are the people that are the change agents, and I would consider myself to be one as well. Anyway.
Independent and alternative media, which is largely personally or directly funded, self-funded, or in some cases also speaking with the CBC in earnest about a lot of issues, and outlets like CTV and Global. So there's good journalists in all of those newsrooms, but they shouldn't be paid by the government.
Well, Chris,
I didn't even get to my point. Oh my God, I'm all over the place. Okay, so if Viva Fry wants to get these people on his show, he might have to wait, like, I don't even know how long, because even the Methylquin mass tort, that was started, I forget, it was either 2017 or 2018, and I got onto that shortly after because of to get the information out there, and I knew people that did have adverse events that they experienced because of it. So I'm like, yeah, like if we can change policies to make it where this is not something that's enforced, like especially without like more like proper testing being done on these products, and especially if they're banned in other countries, absolutely red flag. And so that we thought that was important, obviously, because these are our hero types, first responder types, and it's important that we protect them and not allow them to be friggin' guinea pigs for unnecessary therapeutics. Like, this is silly to me. Like, it's just so audacious. And so he might have to wait a few years because, again, it's in the courts and it takes a long time. But there would be several people I know that would be very interesting to have on a show that I think are just incredible people. And again, this is why I'm doing it as well, is because a lot of people got profoundly impacted, and this was unfair, unjustifiable, unconstitutional, unlawful, and these people did not deserve it. And it's because of people like Rosemary Barton and David Cochrane and Peter Mansbridge and people at the House of Commons that were pushing propaganda and lying about so many different things. So I talk about Russia, Ukraine again. That was big. There were so many lies about that, and even with the Polish farmers dying, like this was Ukrainian air defense, allegedly. Like there's just strong evidence to suggest that, and something again that was confirmed, and they tried to blame that on Russia, and again that's further inciting or fueling the fire, essentially, so to speak. And they wanted a peace treaty before that. I had shared on social media, just to have it on the record for people to get out there, that this was something that people knew was coming and could have avoided. Like there could have been a peace deal signed before it escalated. And there's just too many facts out there for people to dismiss that. And I mean that respectfully. And so that got me more blacklisted when I started sharing that information, because again, it's people were very much in support of that and not getting the right information, even within my industry. And then after that, like it was the Israel-Palestine incident, and again, I lost a lot. The remaining, almost not all, obviously, but they're like a larger percentage of the people that I was working with. They thought that what I was sharing was Anyway, but I was just sharing things that I thought needed to be, that warranted analysis. Absolutely.
What did you think about that?
Yeah, that was a tough room. So we were anticipating that one. So as everybody knows, Ryan Thorpe, our investigative journalist, he's done a ton of work digging up FOIs and information and data about the CBC, namely their disgusting bonuses that they continuously hand out to themselves, even though their ratings are microscopic. And so they're like, hey, CTF, you should all come testify. We're summoning you to this committee on Parliament Hill. And I was just bracing for it, right? Because you're in there, you're with a bunch of members of parliament who really don't like you. And they've got this ancient attitude towards what I would call alternative media or independent media. So things like Rebel, True North, Western Standard, like our podcasts that we often go on with folks. And so what that clip was a clip from a Bloc Québécois member of parliament trying to kind of mean girl cancel me for daring to go on and talk about True North. And I just got to say, having come up through the ranks through Sun News Network and, we're on Rebel all the time and True North, that's done. Like that whole cancel culture thing, like that was so a few years ago. They need to drop that. And so I really wanted to make that clear to them that no matter which organization you're speaking to, if it's a news organization, there are legit good reporters in each of those organizations, even in some mainstream media organizations, I will concede. And so that is why we gave that answer, to really kind of set them back on their heel and say, especially as government, you should not be telling Canadians which news they should be turning into. And we certainly don't need government funded media.
Yeah, no, good point, Chris. But let's just take a step back too, right? Chris, I think this is your first committee appearance in the House of Commons, right? Yes. And you were thrown into a bit of a hostile one, right? So folks, like when you go to committee, most times, most groups, not the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, of course, but most groups, when they go to committee, they're like, oh, we need more government funding. We need the government to do more tax dollars, more tax dollars, more tax dollars. But you, on the other hand, went to committee saying, hey, folks, you're wasting money like crazy. Cut it out. Defund the state broadcaster and the media subsidies. We don't need it. So, Chris, take us behind the scenes. How were you feeling going into committee? How were you prepping? Pull the curtain back for us.
So can I tell the little story?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So folks who are regular listeners to the podcast probably already understand that Franco works a lot. Okay. I'm going to tell two funny little stories, actually.
Oh, no.
There was this one time, it was like Saturday. I think it was like 6 a.m. and he phones me. I'm in a dead sleep. And usually you're trained to do that in media, that you got to go on talk radio. So I'm like, carbon taxes are bad, right? When I answer the phone. And yeah, Franco's just at work in Ottawa. It's 9 o'clock for him because this was in BC. It was so funny. And so I'm telling that little story to set up this one. It was the one day Franco had taken off. It was vacation. He had this out of office responder set up. He was going. I won't reveal where you went.
Yeah, hey, go Bills.
Okay, so he headed over to Buffalo to go to this massive blizzard snowball thing that they have there. Apparently it went great and the Bills won. So that was great. So it's the one day, folks, that he's not going to be there Monday. Sure enough, committee phones. They're like, hey, Environment Committee calling. Can you come to say why the carbon tax is terrible? So that was one thing. And so Franco couldn't come do that. So we had to get somebody to do it. And then like an hour later, they're like, hey, Heritage Committee calling. Can you come to explain why we need to defund the CBC? So I swear, Franco, there is somebody, either an MP's office or the clerk's office, that is punking you. So this is how this all wound up, with myself and our friend and colleague Ryan Thorpe doing the tag team thing at the Heritage Committee, and our brand new Atlantic director and our general counsel, which is a smart way of saying in-house lawyer, because we sure need them, and Jeff Bowes, our research director. They had to tag team over at Environment. This is how this all happened in a very short period of time. And so a lot goes into this, because you got to keep your opening statement to under 5 minutes, because they will definitely cut your mic off. Because like Franco just said, they are not happy to see you there. There's very few people that want to watch the Taxpayers Federation walk in and start blasting at that committee room.
Yeah, no kidding. So take us kind of though behind the scenes. Like I
Yeah.
appreciate that story. I wasn't actually sure which one you're going to bring up, but that's not a bad one. But like take us behind your prep, right? Like what are you looking for? What message, first of all, what message are you trying to get across for supporters at committee? And then how are you preparing for like the back and forth, like the knives or the mud that they're going to sling at you?
Big time. So we went in there with 3 key points that we wanted to make sure we got across. 1, the CBC is a huge waste of money. 2, nearly nobody is watching it.
Yep.
And 3, journalists should not be paid by the government. Period. It's an ethical and moral issue. It is a direct conflict of interest, in fact, for journalists to be paid by the government, because journalism is supposed to speak truth to power. And if you're counting on the powerful government for your paycheck, pretty hard to do your job. So we wanted to go in with those 3 key points. And then from there, you got to flesh those out into around 4 minutes and 30 seconds. And then the fun thing starts. And that's when we start our mock rounds of prep. And that is where people jump on your Zoom call and they pretend that they're members of parliament and they start trying to hit you with tough questions. The one thing that I'm really glad they kind of sort of brought up, which is really important, is that they mentioned Indigenous programming. And I can't stress this enough. The CBC spends more money on its bonuses than it does on Indigenous programming. Do not let those elitist government-funded media employees in Toronto tell you that we need to keep the $1.4 billion state broadcaster because of Indigenous programming. There are other stations that do a much better job, and they largely stand on their own 2 feet. So that was definitely something I wanted to get across. That would have been one of the more tough questions that we would have anticipated at that committee. So a lot goes into it. Same thing happened with Ryan Thorpe. He was coming up with all sorts of stuff. So I had my statement in front of me, and Ryan had a binder like this with like tabs in it and like FOIs and stuff that he had ready to go. And the news we broke there, to both yours and Ryan's credit,
My mic's off again. It's ATIPs, or Access to Information Requests in Canada, and Freedom of Information in the US. I do want to share Instagram because something just was sent to me. And I think I do want to address this because it's a good point that I wanted to stress as well. And so this is from Mario. I think he's amazing. And this is good what he's doing, obviously, and questioning organizations within government, holding them to account. Full transparency. There needs to be more scrutiny. I absolutely agree with that. And then I'm going to just give my comments.
Covering what I believe he referred to as money laundering and ridiculous spending made by USAID, I started digging a little bit further to see if we need to do the same thing with Global Affairs Canada. Watch this. We spent $76 million on inclusive economic recovery. I have no idea what that even means. But then there's also gender responsive systems, an approach to universal healthcare in the Philippines, which we gave them $7.2 million. Again, I have no idea what that means. And this is the very interesting stuff. What business do we have giving over $500 million to the Canadian Climate and Nature Fund for the private sector in Asia?
Wow.
Why are we as taxpayers sending nearly a third of $1 billion for climate change in Asia? And we didn't do it just once. We sent $200 million again for the same thing. And it gets better. In 2022, we sent the World Bank $1 billion for a climate investment fund. Let's not forget about the feminist climate action in Western Africa, where they got $16 million, or gender transformative climate adaptation. So I don't even, what does this even mean? As long as it has gender and feminist, it's like they're making it rain. Now, this is interesting. From 2018 to 2022, Canadians donated their taxpayer dollars to the Aga Khan Foundation. I apologize if I butchered the name. That's over $150 million. Now, before 2018, from 2013 to 2018, it was $235 million. That foundation alone has received over $300 million of your taxpayer dollars. And my condolences, because he did recently pass away, and this is absolutely no bearing on the man. This is completely the bearing on the Liberal government, which is suspicious, especially given the fact that Trudeau violated ethic by accepting a $200,000 vacation on his private island. It included transportation and accommodations. Let me word it to you in a way that you might understand it better. Trudeau was found guilty of an ethics violation. He accepted nearly $250,000 vacation from the same person to whom he gave to his foundation $250 million. So my question is, should Canada do the same and shut down global affairs? Thanks to Elon Musk.
Okay, and so he's asking if we should shut down Global Affairs Canada. These are the budgetary expenses that people in my network are complaining about, and they're saying that this is absolutely appalling, disgusting, all of these stuff. That they're saying that these initiatives, there is corruption within it that needs to be investigated. They're saying it is wasteful spending, money that needs to be going to actually, oh my God, like there's just so much more that could be invested in the troops, in law enforcement, in equipment, gear, but maybe better salaries. There's just so much. I can go on a freaking tangent about that. But again, this is wasteful spending, and it's targeted programs that, if this is DEI, ESG, woke stuff, or this LGBTQ plus IA stuff, this is a lot of money. This is billions of dollars, and it's being targeted in areas where the religions, the rules or the laws that are in place. For example, Sharia law is these are legal frameworks that are put in place that are largely taken from the Quran, which is the religious foundations or principles that are, again, utilized in the legal system. Just like, for example, for Christianity, our constitutions, charter of rights, our legal frameworks, they're derived from our Christian Bible. And the same thing for Jews, for example. They have the Tanakh, the Talmud. They're religious. They have religious religious texts, and that is what their laws are based on, the principles and foundations of the laws. And so I hope that makes sense to people. And so within these certain religions that practice Sharia law, for example, things like homosexuality, these are sins and they're punishable by death. And this is a fact. And again, there's many countries that are practicing this, and there are many factions within countries where a lot of people are not practicing Sharia law or don't want to practice it, but there are groups from within, and people are estimating it to be approximately anywhere between 10 and 15% of within communities where they're trying to enforce and impose Sharia law. For example, in Canada, there are people that are here, and for example, mosques are being used, or legal buildings are being used, and again, this is all people that are enforcing Sharia law within Canada for these certain demographics, and they are absolutely giving out punishments and charges and fines and all this stuff to families based on Sharia law. And again, I'm sounding the alarm on this because, again, this is very easily researched and investigated, and so I'm trying to give this, and again, to people within government, to this needs to be addressed. And so what you're doing is you're funding people or movements that are anti-government that you're funding, and they're also anti-culture, they're anti-religion, and it would be such a small percentage of that population that would actually get any money from this, right? Or get awareness, again, of what people within those countries believe to be sinful behavior. So again, this woke DEI stuff, they believe that to be sinful. There are a lot of rules for women where men own them. There's legal guardianships required. If they're in court, there's less credibility given to women or importance given to women as witnesses as opposed to men. Obviously not allowed to vote, not allowed to go to school, not allowed to work. They have to be fully covered in so many different areas. And so you're not helping that at all. And so it would be less than 0.5% of that population would be anyways, what they're saying would be getting the money, or would stand to gain from that money. And again, would they be standing to gain if it's pushing an agenda or some kind of a culture or cult that that is going to get people killed in those countries. And so we really do need to question that. And I think it's really in poor taste at the very least. And again, there's taxpayers in Canada that don't want this to go there, right? And even within other countries where it's there's Christians, right, where it's more orthodox or more people that are practicing more closely their religious values and stuff like that. There are also people that don't that within the Christian religions that believe that homosexuality is a sin and all of these different things, and so and that believe abortion is murder, etc. But like and so even within these communities, like I don't necessarily see how helpful that would be. Again, I think it's a waste of money, and it might be putting more of a target on people's backs. And again, this is like, especially if you're targeting children with this propaganda, what we know to be pseudoscience at best. But again, this woke mind ideology, it really does need to stop, because in so many different ways. And so the fact that we're funding this in so many different countries, when there's people in Canada that still need running water, we have so many more homeless people now than we did even 5 years ago. And I can confirm that because I've worked at the Ottawa Mission since 2016. And although in the last 2 years, again, I've taken a bit of a pause on that as well. I was very active, like especially during COVID, and I was talking to the director, and I was giving him like the information as well, and he was letting me know with what was going on, the information that he was getting from people that were in the shelters and the security professionals that were working as well, and other staff. And anyway, I'm going on all these tangents, but even in the Canadian military, with this DEI woke push, a lot of the money within the Canadian Armed Forces budget is going towards these woke DEI ideologies. It's very harmful, and this climate scam stuff. And again, this is a lot of money, and we need guns, we need ammo, we need better uniforms. There are Canadian Armed Forces members, because of the mortgage and rent increases through the friggin' roof, they're still paying it. They were living in their vehicles and having to move back in with their parents, being of service to Canada. Are you kidding me? This used to be where if you had a job like that, even like 20 years ago, you could fully support a family, own a home, own a car, own a nice TV. And again, and deservedly so, right? Because these are people that we need in society. They're the hero type first responder types, and we need to take better care of them. The people that are going and doing work at home and abroad, right? I'm talking about firefighters and stuff too. Like, this has been nonsensical. And so this money is being wasted, long story longer. And when I was in like these programs, like I can't even believe these are approved, because for me, like these were any budgetary analysis that we did, it was 100% necessary. Like what we were spending the money on was 100% necessary. And there were even things that we were cutting and had to cut that we thought should stay, because again, like we had to manage the budget, right? And it had to go on important things that made us effective, highly functioned, qualified, skilled, trained, kitted up warriors, right? And so and so within Global Affairs Canada too, there are groups within Global Affairs Canada that are doing incredible work all over the world and in Ottawa. And I don't think that these people should be defunded, for example. So again, like there are people complaining from within Global Affairs Canada as well that are saying that this money is being wasted and not on things that are necessary. And it is making it where the organization is getting discredited. Absolutely. Just like RCMP with a lot of the woke DEI stuff, there's a lot of budgetary planning and money going towards that in the RCMP as well, and has been for years, and it was getting higher. And it's unfortunate that even within the CIA and the FBI, there's people doing great work. But again, I'm saying at the top, people that are pushing this woke stuff and the other stuff, like the carbon stuff, the ESG stuff, the CBDC stuff. Anyway, these people that are more aligned with WEF and the UN, which is very concerning at this point, than they should be, and the Bilderberg groups. But anyway, doing good work, and their reputations are getting destroyed by morons, by absolute morons. And unfortunately, it's people within their organizations that are their bosses. And so there's literally nothing they can do about it, because every time they do try to, they get shut down. And again, I have so many different examples of people that can't talk yet about it because they're in courts, but I can give examples of people that are on the record, like Helen Groos. And my God, well, she wasn't working in the government, but definitely helped the government and Canadians would be Tamara Leach and Chris Babar and Pat King and change agents and conservatives largely like left them out to dry, which is why a lot of people voted PPC or not at all, or were disappointed. But again, people have to try to manage that piece because these are hero types, and I'm hoping that the more people say that this is why people were upset with the conservatives and trying to hold them accountable, like these are the reasons why, right? So if Pierre's listening, or his cap, or anyone within the conservative party that can impact the what Pierre's saying, like maybe he should start like rallying towards people and supporting people that like risked everything. They risked their lives, they risked their careers, they risked their reputations, they went to jail, they got charged, they were in the courts for years. These people were heroes, and they lost so much. And the Freedom Convoy getting as big as it was necessary. And people like her absolutely, like this, the information that was getting suppressed in Canada, especially by, again, CBC, it was not going to get out unless we had the Freedom Convoy. And so I want to say that, yes, it was hijacked, and yes, there were people that were instigators that sowed the seeds and created events that led to the development and the organization of the Freedom Convoy to begin with. I'm saying the same thing about January 6th. I'm saying the same thing about the station Plan coup in Ukraine. I'm saying the same thing about so many different events, and I hope people don't get offended that, unfortunately, like, it also involves us. We can't just be naive and think that this is stuff that's happening in other countries and it's not happening here. And anyway, and so there are people within Global Affairs Canada that I know personally that are incredible people, and they do really hard work that's necessary. And but again, they're getting a bad name because of morons.
Ontario's Premier Doug Ford.
I'm just going to share more of my videos because she's going to eventually get into the committee meeting. I thought it was very interesting. But I want to get into this first. So this was from James O'Keefe. I think, I have my... I think he's interesting. I'm not sure if he's...
He was in the Navy. He was 250 days at sea. Never saw his family.
This is John Bryan, Prince Andrew's crisis advisor, the British royal family, and he was the one that assisted in the trying to do harm reduction, risk management, because of all the information that was coming out regarding Prince Andrew and the allegations that were being made against him having sex with underage children. I guess not. I mean, anyway, but underage women. Females.
Really pissed because he lied Epstein. And then I did a big thing in the Daily Mail saying that I believed Andrew. And then I found out he was lying. I was so pissed. No, he was underage girls.
John Bryan has been a close confidant to the British royal family for a long time. He worked for Queen Elizabeth II, was, quote, best friends with Princess Diana, and had a long-term intimate relationship with the Duchess of York, Sarah Ferguson. According to Bryan, he practically raised Sarah Ferguson's children, the princesses Beatrice and Eugene. And Bryan said that he maintained a friendship with Ferguson's husband, the Duke of York, Prince Andrew.
Tell me, like, your story.
So my story, you want to know my story?
What?
Like, I've been so famous at times when I was on the front page of every newspaper, because I was working with the Queen of England.
Okay.
She's Queen Elizabeth. I was working with all the families, Princess Diana, my best friend. And I met the Duchess of York.
Okay.
That's Prince Andrew's wife. They were separated. And then Sarah and I sort of fell in love. And we lived together for like 7 years in my house in England. And I raised their 2 little children for some period.
Wait, her
Beatrice usually.
So my point to sharing this is lessons learned from this for him. Unfortunately, it was too late. He found out that he was actually helping an actual confirmed pedophile. And again, even with the royal family, there are good people within the royal family, but I don't think that Canada, like, I think we should cut ties, to be perfectly honest with you. But I'm coming from an Irish, Scottish, French background, Indigenous background as well, for certain family members, and yeah, and so like we don't understand this. Anyway, it is what it is, but we still want to have the Christian foundations as part of our laws. Anyways, he was a crisis advisor to Prince Andrew. That's a very important job, and so if you're good at your job, you're going to do a background investigation yourself into the person that you're working with, for example. And so the more digging you do, if you find out, and you should be finding this out, it's very important. And again, if you are a crisis advisor, you need to be on your game and have access to people where you can confirm things are true or not true, or see if there's any skeletons in the closet, etc. That is part of your job. And if you see that, like, then you can make the decision there with informed consent, or with more information, if you're actually going to cover for these people or not. And I would argue that people that do cover for or support and enable criminals at that level, I think that it's just horrible. And so I would just argue that maybe it just has to do with the people that are hiring are just not qualified enough. But these are the people they would hire, people that they can dupe, right? Say like, oh no, I'm innocent, stuff like that, and then rally the troops, and then get them to cover up your lies. Anyways,
And usually, those were my children. Those were my kids. I raised those kids. Day to day raised. I was father to those kids.
Prince Andrew's connection to Jeffrey Epstein emerged in 2010, when photos showed them walking together in New York's Central Park. Epstein had already been convicted in 2008 of procuring a 14-year-old girl for prostitution. In 2014, a woman named Virginia Giuffre alleged in a Florida court filing that Jeffrey Epstein paid her to have sex with Prince Andrew when she was 17, a minor. On April 25th, a few weeks ago, Giuffre died by, quote, suicide. Prince Andrew denied Giuffre's sex abuse allegations in a now infamous 2019 BBC interview.
She said she had sex with you 3 times, once on his private island in a group of 7 or 8 other girls.
7 or 8? Wild.
No to all of it.
All of it. Absolutely no to all of it.
The interview was a public relations disaster for the royal family and prompted the Queen to strip Prince Andrew of his royal duties. In the aftermath of that interview, the prince sought advice from a longtime royal family confidant, John Bryan.
I wonder if that was state-funded media.
Oh, very good. Oh, no, we're very civilized. We'd go have dinner at his house. He'd have dinner at my house to see his kids. So then we go on a holiday in the south of France, and I get a big property, like 10 acres, right near Central Bay, right? Nobody has 10 acres. I'm on the biggest property, beautiful house. And I rent it so that we're privacy, right? Because there's paparazzi everywhere. There's hundreds of paparazzi, not 10, not 20, hundreds. I know.
And this is already when Prince Andrew.
Yes, Prince Andrew. Yeah, he's on the. He was in the Navy. He was 250 days at sea. He never saw his kid.
2 weeks after Prince Andrew's BBC interview, John Bryan was brought to the Royal Lodge, where Prince Andrew lives, to offer crisis management advice. According to the Telegraph, the meeting was conducted discreetly. At the royal residence, Bryan observed that Prince Andrew was visibly distressed and struggling to focus, reportedly unable to concentrate for more than 40 minutes at a time due to the strain he was under. As reported in the Daily Mail, John Bryan constructed a 5-page document emphasizing that Prince Andrew should publicly show empathy for Epstein's victims. Back in November 2022, Bryan publicly stated that he believed Prince Andrew was innocent of the claims made against him related to the Jeffrey Epstein sex trafficking scheme. Now, in our exclusive hidden camera undercover footage, John Bryan reveals for the first time that Prince Andrew did, in fact, have sex with underage girls.
Was he already even like involved with like
other girls? I was so pissed about that.
Okay, I thought this was gonna be groundbreaking, and so like I thought that's what James O'Keefe was like was worried about, was releasing this information. We already know. This has already been confirmed. Like oh my God, I've been talking about that, sharing that photo of that late woman for friggin' years now. This is what I mean. Fuck, even with Pam Bondi, like giving information about the Epstein files released to like propaganda media on the left, well, on the right in that circumstance, but like we already had that information. In fact, we had more information than that years ago, and even that was redacted. Like I'm just, I don't know. Yeah, I like this. The real difference, there's people who want to change and there's people who want change, right? So you have to change yourself and be the person that others would want to aspire to be like. I hope that makes sense. This was funny, but anyway. I've talked about the Arrive scam app for so many years, but this was a good video and a better interpretation of it.
How does a simple app cost more than a fucking Hollywood blockbuster? The Arrive Can app. It was slated to cost $80,000. It became $54 million. There was no record or paper trail of just about every decision. One tiny consulting firm received $11 million via non-competitive contracts. Some developers billed over $1,100 a day, but yet their roles were never defined and we cannot track where that work went.
This is what we're talking about when your taxes are going up. It's going to places like this.
I run a tech company, and there's no way the ArriveCan app was $54 million. I mean, you even have a Toronto company that managed to duplicate the app in 2 days. And their CEO said they could have done it from scratch for $1 million. Even $1 million? Generous. Because honestly, the $80,000 estimate was probably spot on. So somewhere along the line, someone made a lot of money. And I would not be surprised if there was some kickbacks involved.
How does a simple app cost more than a fucking Hollywood?
Yep, millions and millions of dollars. Sole source. It was such a sin. And I was offering for pennies, significantly less than that. And I would have done a better job. Respectfully, obviously, I would have a team and stuff like that as well. People I would hire to assist me. But again, with the macro and the micro level stuff, I would be like providing the whatever you want to call it, the orders. This was interesting from Poland. See, I thought like Poland and Hungary, when I emailed Pierre Poilievre in 2021, because even at that point I knew he was going to be I really hoped that he would be the leader for the Conservative Party, and that's why I'm saying like he got sabotaged in so many different ways, and there was a lot of pokers in the fire, and he's getting a lot of heat for things that he was not responsible for and was trying to manage. But again, he wasn't the leader at the time, and so he was very much like limited, obviously. And then I want to get on to Doug Ford. Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, this guy was able to have his by-election and get reelected. I was saying even before the friggin' elections that people shouldn't be rewarding bad behavior, and that this guy's a criminal, and that he is not the Conservative that you think he is. And again, this guy, and like he did the elections, and it was because he was exploiting the fact that the Conservatives at that point were still popular. They were very popular. This was before the whole like Trump tariff friggin' stops. And I think that Carney and Trump were involved in that as well. And so just to be clear on that, or they were aware of what narrative was going to be pushed. And so that's unfortunate. That's another poker in the fire, by the way. And it would have just been nice, though, if he would have just had more support publicly for people that really did risk so much for Canada. And they also are the reason why the conservative movement got as big as it did. I'm talking about the Freedom Convoy. A lot of conservatives were in that friggin' convoy on the right side, and trying to make it peaceful. And so it's just unfortunate. And so there's ways to mitigate that. But I said that Hungary and Poland, they were on the right track, and warning about immigration, like just at the level we were doing it, and how it was already out of control, and there was already a lot of crime and housing crisis and inflation and et cetera, and they generally vote liberal, and we can't have that at this point just because, again, of all the corruption involved with what they've been doing, right? Like the cabinet members, House of Commons, that a lot of people got reelected that have been the one that have been pushing bills and policies and censorship and mandates and for years, which has led to people dying and a lot of suffering needlessly, and this is stuff that we're still dealing with today. But this was very obvious to a lot of people, and we have made things so much worse for our first responder types. So much worse. They are very overwhelmed right now. They're, again, with the increase in the crime rates in Toronto, on the outskirts of Toronto and Ottawa, like the major areas, like Vancouver, you name it, it's out of control, and there's not enough people to manage it already. And we've been saying this for years, and then you're adding in more, and then that's going to be more crime and more, so much other stuff. Not helping. These safe supply initiatives, definitely not helping. So you're screwing over a lot of security guards that work around places that now have to have more security because of these safe supply areas. People are getting high, and the government's funding it, which means the taxpayers, and people that are high or stoned and congregating in these areas because that's where they're getting their fix. They're more apt to be more bold and go into things like liquor stores, and they're more violent. And when they're on certain drugs, it is almost impossible to get these people to de-escalate. And I've looked at the videos too of like multiple security professionals trying to detain one individual, and out of control. And then obviously with doctors and nurses, people coming here for our healthcare, free healthcare, and again, overwhelmed. There's just so much. There's so much, and they're making it worse. And these censorship bills that makes the country worse. We've been there before, and it would just be nice if we had people that made sense in, and if people would have friggin' voted conservative more, it would be less of a nightmare.
Pani Przewodnicząca, Szanowni Europosłowie, Pani Urszulo, najwyższy czas, by ktoś wprost Pani powiedział to, co o Pani myśli zdecydowana większość Europejczyków. Wybranie Pani na stanowisko przewodniczącej Komisji Europejskiej w poprzedniej kadencji było ogromnym błędem i niektórzy do dzisiaj mają kaca po tej decyzji. Jest Pani twarzą
So she's saying you are the face of the European Green Deal, which is destroying
Europejskiego Zielonego Ładu, który niszczy
the European economy and agriculture, which is
europejską
leading to
gospodarkę i rolnictwo, który prowadzi do tego, że z Europy
Europe becoming an economic backwater.
robi się gospodarczy skansen. Jest Pani
You are the face of all the EU's climate.
twarzą wszystkich unijnych klimatycznych wariat, które
Craziness,
prowadzą do tego, że
which
my,
leads to
Europejczycy,
us
stajemy się
Europeans
coraz
becoming poorer and
biedniejsi.
poorer.
Wreszcie
Finally, you are the face of the migration pact, and I've talked about that, the replacement migration, the UN agenda. Like it's a literal document. I have literally shared this. Like I'm like, how are we why? and there's people doing great work in the UN or for the UN as well. Unfortunately, there are people within these friggin' organizations as well that are supporting and enabling things like human trafficking, drug trafficking, etc. And it's annoying. And the Century 21 initiative or whatever it is with Mark Wiseman, Mark Carney just hired him as part of his cabinet or whatever you want to call it. It's just an absolute slap in the face to Canadians, first responder types that are very concerned about this. Like, are they talking to like the chiefs of police? Are they talking to chiefs of the fire departments? Are they talking to doctors within major hospitals across Canada? I don't think they are. Are they talking to teachers who are now getting, and like the friggin' classrooms are overloaded. And again, there's such a culture clash and so much more, oh my God, harassment at the very least. But like there's more clashes within classrooms. And so this is absolutely impacting children as well. And then also add the layer of pushing the woke DEI, climate, ESG, all that friggin' propaganda to students as well. Like we're really not helping.
jest Pani twarzą paktu migracyjnego i zwracam się do Pani jak
You as a woman to woman, as mother to mother.
kobieta do kobiety, jak matka do matki. Jak Pani
How can you not be ashamed promoting something
nie
like
wstyd, promować coś takiego jak pakt
the Migration Pact, which leads
migracyjny,
to
który
millions
prowadzi do tego, że miliony kobiet
of
w
women in
Europie i
Europe
dzieci
and children feeling threatened
czuje się zagrożonych na ulicach
on the streets of their own cities, their own towns, their own suburbs areas now.
swoich własnych miast.
You are responsible for every rape, for every assault,
Odpowiada pani za każdy gwałt, za każdą napaść, za każdy
for every tragedy caused by the influx of illegal migrants and people, again, like illegal, maybe not, maybe coming here legally, but again, exploiting our weak system, even criminals coming here that have committed war crimes and crimes against humanity. And they are allowed here, they're being protected, and they're being given taxpayers' money. And we're seeing more shootings, more stabbings. And again, this is illegal firearms, a lot of them coming through the borders that are very insecure. And I've talked about that for a few years as well. And I've shared stuff with CBSA officers at the top, directors saying like, this is happening at the borders. Here's some videos. You might want to look into that, right? And they appreciate it. But anyways, and so we're seeing an increase in violence against people, and
każdą tragedię spowodowaną napływem nielegalnych imigrantów, bo to pani tych ludzi
it's you who are inviting these people here to Europe,
zaprasza tutaj na teren Europy i za to,
and for what you do,
co pani robi, za to, co pani robi,
you should go to prison, not to the European Commission.
powinna pani trafić do więzienia, a nie do Komisji Europejskiej. Pani
Your presence as head of the European Commission
obecność na stanowisku szefowej Komisji Europejskiej to
is the downfall, the further downfall of the European Union.
dalszy upadek Unii Europejskiej. I wie pani, co myślimy
And you know what we think about your European Green Deal? Just like Canada's Green Fund?
o pani Europejskim Zielonym Ładzie? Oto. Wie pani, co myślimy o
About the migration action?
migracyjnym?
Looking that up.
Oto.
You are not even looking in my direction, so that she's not even acknowledging her.
Pani nie patrzy w moją stronę.
Shame. Good. She's calling her out. It's shameful. Not even looking at her, giving her the respect of that, despite the fact that it's true what she's saying.
Wstyd. Chcemy
We want a Europe of free and sovereign nations,
Europy wolnych i suwerennych narodów, a nie
not a sick leftist ideology.
chorej lewackiej ideologii.
And honestly, liberals, because there's good liberals out there as well, obviously, like there's great liberals, they're not speaking up. They're completely like head in the friggin' sand, not speaking up and calling this stuff out. This is what I mean. There's more people that would be considered right-wing that are calling out people and issues that are even on the right. And this is what I mean. This is where it's been so biased as well, where there's people that are liberals, politicians, liberal activists, like whatever you want to call it. And it's just a shame that they're not calling out what they should be calling out. And from Poland, hands off, and to all the soldiers.
A od Polski ręce precz i wszystkim
And from,
którzy w tym
who are defending the eastern border
momencie bronią wschodniej granicy
of the European Union. At the moment, you should bow in toss. Thank you.
Europejskiej powinna się pani kłaniać w pas. Dziękuję.
And it's a mixed crowd, but I totally agree with what she's saying. So anyways, I'm going to go back to the Tax Federation. Very important.
Credit. You guys did this at the Ottawa office. We did an FOI and the Freedom of Information request, the 6 o'clock news audience for the CBC. So the supper hour news is so small, it's really hard to measure. In Toronto, it is 0.7% of that city's population is watching that thing. So that was news that we broke. So much, to answer your question, so much prep goes into this. And then there's also like the awkward questions, like from your friends at work. It's like, so what are you going to wear? It's like, no, I think I'll leave my leopard print dress at home. I won't wear my trucker hat with like the Viking horns coming off of it. So a lot of prep goes into that, because in all seriousness, if there's something distracting, like your hair is over like this or something, nobody's paying attention to what you're saying. See, look how distracted you are right now. You can't even focus. So if your hair looks goofy, nobody's listening to you. Lots goes into these.
And I'm sure it took every ounce of restraint on your end to not wear your Defund the CBC shirt in committee.
Yeah, I packed it.
You know, Chris, I just want to say you and Ryan both did such a good job at committee. And, you know, I just want our audience to just watch the full effect. So, folks, we're going to play now the entire committee appearance between Chris and those members of parliament trying to waste your money. You're going to hear her formal opening speech, and then you're going to see the fireworks go off. Chris going back and forth with the members of parliament from all parties. And Chris just does such an amazing job advocating on behalf of taxpayers. So, without further ado, drum roll, please. Everyone enjoy Chris's committee appearance to defund the CBC.
My name is Chris Sims. I'm the Alberta Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. I'm here with my colleague Ryan Thorpe, the investigative journalist for the CTF. We are here to speak for thousands of hardworking taxpayers who want to defund the CBC. This needs to happen for three important reasons: the cost of the CBC. Nearly nobody is watching the CBC, and journalists should not be paid by the government. First, the cost. The CBC is getting $1.4 billion from taxpayers this year. That money could instead pay the salaries of around 7,000 paramedics and 7,000 police officers. That money could instead pay for groceries for about 85,000 Canadian families for a year. Instead, taxpayers are paying $1.4 billion so the CBC can hand out huge bonuses, get microscopic ratings, and overpay its out-of-touch executives. CBC CEO Catherine Tate refused to tell this committee if she will take a severance when she leaves the state broadcaster. Tate considers that to be a personal matter, end quote. It's not personal if it's taxpayers' money. Documents obtained by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation show Tate is paid between $460,000 and $551,000 this year, with a bonus of up to 28%. That is a bonus of $154,000. That bonus is more than the average Canadian family earns in a year. Around this time last year, the CBC asked for more money. After that, just before Christmas, the CBC announced layoffs in its newsrooms. I've worked in many newsrooms, and getting let go is not a bowl of cherries. But what about the bonuses at that same time? Documents obtained by the CTF show the CBC did hand out bonuses costing $18 million. As the CBC fan group Friends of Canadian Media put it, quote, "This decision is deeply out of touch and unbefitting of our national public broadcaster," end quote. Thank you to the members from the Conservatives, the Bloc, and the NDP who voted to hold the CBC to account for these bonuses. Let's take a look at viewership. According to its own latest quarterly report, CBC News Network's audience share is 1.7%. Meaning more than 98% of Canadians are choosing to not watch CBC's news channel. We have some breaking news here in committee. Documents obtained by the CTF show the CBC's supper hour news audience is so small, it's difficult to measure. In Toronto, the CBC's 6 o'clock news has an audience of 0.7% of that city's population. CBC's entertainment barely rates better than its news. The Murdoch Mysteries, which is not produced by the CBC, pulls in its biggest audience with about 1.9% of the population. Lastly, journalists should not be paid by the government. A free press means journalists free from government. A journalist who is paid by the government is in a direct conflict of interest. You cannot hold the powerful government to account when you're counting on the powerful government for your paycheck. The CBC is government-funded media. This government funding has warped the media landscape for decades, putting private media companies at a disadvantage. And so that affliction is catching. Other media companies are also on government payroll now. At the same time, trust in journalism has plummeted. About 61% of Canadians now think journalists are, quote, purposely trying to mislead people by saying things they know are false or gross exaggerations. Canadians need a press that is free from government so the people can hold their government to account. The CBC is a huge waste of money. Nearly nobody is watching it, and journalists should not be paid by the government. it is time to defund the CBC.
Ms. Sims and Mr. Thorpe, we heard from the incoming CEO of CBC this past Wednesday that she had not heard any conversations from Canadians about defunding the CBC. I'm wondering if that resonates or lines up with what you and your organization has heard about this subject over the last number of years.
No, through the chair, with respect, that doesn't line up with what we're seeing with our organization. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation has been pushing for the CBC to be defunded. We hear from our supporters every single day, and there are thousands of them that want the CBC to be defunded. So no, that does not line up with what our supporters want.
I found it interesting when I heard that response on Wednesday, and we had Ms. Catherine Tate, who's the current CEO, her term coming to an end in the next month or so, who had, through an access to information request, it was revealed that she noted that there was momentum that was growing in the defund the CBC movement across Canada. So I'm wondering if you have seen over the last number of years, and you'd mentioned you hear often from folks involved with your organization, has there been momentum growing in the defund the CBC
movement? Yeah, for sure. So I've been a journalist for most of my adult life. Largely in mainstream media, in and out of newsrooms, largely here in Ottawa. And I can tell you that there wasn't really a serious movement to defund the CBC 15 years ago, and maybe not even 10 years ago. Now you literally see it on t-shirts, on bumper stickers. People are pushing for the state broadcaster to be defunded for two reasons. Again, it's a huge waste of money. Just period. $1.4 billion is an astonishing amount of money. And two, journalists shouldn't be paid by the government. It doesn't matter if the journalist is right-wing or left-wing or a space alien. They shouldn't be paid by the government because it's a direct conflict of interest. So there is definitely a movement that's growing.
So it sounds like something else that Justin Trudeau has broken. But I am curious when it comes to the quite often we hear from folks that would support the CBC and in fact, even those who would acknowledge some of the challenges that exist, whether it be the bonuses that were paid out or the expense or not liking the programming or acknowledging the bias that exists. But they say, well, we need it because that's how Canadians get their news. I'm wondering if you could comment on that feedback that quite often gets parroted, especially here in the nation's capital.
That's a great question. And it reminds me of the statement that we really appreciated coming from the Friends of Canadian Media when they said that those bonuses, $18 million worth of bonuses, were unbecoming of a public broadcaster. We agree. We agree. That is unbecoming. And so I think it's the bonuses that are really attracting a lot of the attention here. However, if so many people are watching the CBC and getting all their news from the CBC, why is 1.7% of the population of Toronto watching it? It's even lower in Calgary and Edmonton out west. So if the CBC costs us $1.4 billion per year and nobody is watching, is it still a waste of money? Yes, it is.
So for those that would say, well, it's required for Canadian culture, for the preservation of Canadian culture, how would you respond to that?
I find that odd because there's a lot of private media companies and there's a lot of other forms of entertainment and news that Canadians are choosing to watch and to listen to and to share. And the idea that a government-funded broadcaster is going to be the keeper of Canadian culture is kind of insulting to people's intelligence and their own choice. If I don't watch the CBC, does that mean that I'm not Canadian? That's absurd. So no, Canadians are choosing to not watch the CBC. So ergo, we don't need it
30
and
seconds.
we should defund it.
Thank you very much. I think I still had a bit over a minute.
1 minute, 30 seconds. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. It was recently revealed that the government spent over $970,000 to produce a podcast that ended up only having 229 subscribers. That's a lot of dollars per subscriber. I'm wondering if, and this was specifically Stats Canada that had paid this close to $1 million. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or feedback about, nearly $1 million spent to produce a podcast that many people do from their phones, walking down the street, whatever the case is, for virtually no cost. Yet the government spent $1 million, yet only garnered a subscriber base of 229. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or feelings about that.
So off the top, quickly, I actually thought I misheard that when I first heard about it. I thought it was government funding other people's podcasts, whatever it was. But no, this was a government department's podcast. It is astonishing that they're spending a nickel on that. And I'm going to turn this over to my colleague. He's the investigative journalist for the CTF, Ryan Thorpe. Ryan, you were doing some digging on that. It was astonishing to see.
Yeah, so...
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Oh. And you only have 15 seconds. Thanks.
I'll just add quickly that we dug up these records. The costs are ridiculous. They're producing podcasts that no Canadian would ask or be willing to pay for. It's reflected in that subscriber count, and it is clearly a massive waste of our money.
I'll start off with Ms. Sims and Mr. Thorpe. Thank you for being here. I guess the first question I would ask, and I just wanted to acknowledge that I think many Canadians do agree with you that the bonuses were unacceptable. So I acknowledge that. We had a conversation in this room, and it was very clear that, especially considering the economic situation our country is, the challenges that Canadians are facing, it's something that, and I said, did not sit well with Canadians. So I agree with that. I want to talk about the CBC as a concept, though. Back in 1936, when the Conservatives established the CBC, it was there to bring the country together, to connect the country. If you removed the dollar amount and you removed the bonuses, do you agree with the concept of CBC?
It's still a conflict of interest. And I say this more not from a taxpayer's perspective, even though we wouldn't want to spend money on a media company. We don't want to spend money on companies anyway. No corporate welfare. We don't care what they're producing. But as a journalist, a longtime journalist, it is just a fundamental conflict of interest for a journalist to be paid by the government. It doesn't matter if it's a conservative government or an NDP government or a left-leaning or right-leaning journalist. It is just fundamentally a conflict of interest for the media to be funded by the government.
No. I'll take that point. Now, CBC is more than just a television broadcaster. It's more than just a deliverer of news. It does a lot more than that. For example, children's programming. Election coverage in our country, the Olympics, radio. This morning I woke up and I always open up my app, the CBC Listen app, and I listen to the morning news, but I also listen to the world news. That's how I, receive my news. I don't think I've turned on CBC, the channel, for a long time. It's usually direct through YouTube or directly through the website, through the GEM app. The statistics you gave, and I think Ms. Tate actually acknowledged this, that the viewership on television was dropping. But when you start to look at the actual online presence, like, for example, on election night, there were 9 million impression rates on the website. So we're seeing a huge jump in online listening through radio, through YouTube, through the GEM app. So I think it would be fair to say that there may not be growth on television, which is across all broadcasters. We've seen a decline. But would you acknowledge that when it comes to its online presence, the numbers are actually increasing drastically?
So there's a few things there. Mm-hmm. One, again, we're opposed to government-funded media, period. Two, when it comes to ratings, I found it really interesting that Ms. Tate and others at the CBC don't want to give us their subscriber numbers. Not names or anything like that. That would be crazy. But their subscriber numbers to GEM. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, nearly nobody's watching you on TV. Oh, trust us. We're picking it up with GEM. Okay, how many people have got on GEM?
My mic was off. Thank you so much, Orion. That is a huge compliment. I'll take it.
GEM, sorry, I can't tell you that.
Right.
It's really odd. And so that's the main element, is that we don't want government funding media. And that the ratings, right? We don't actually have them for GEM or online.
But the other things are out there. Like, it's very clear. Like, if like, I just went into Chat GPT and put in what are the ratings for listenership, also for online viewing. The numbers come up they come up. They're very new. Like the fact that I said 9 million people tuned in online during election day says a lot. There's a lot of information there. Do you agree with? For example, the wage subsidy and also just the media support for example, Post Media has got tens of millions of dollars. So you disagree with any media? It doesn't matter if it's community-based, a small community newspaper.
Journalists shouldn't be paid by the government.
So
period.
You would even disagree that a small community broadcaster that is not-for-profit, that's servicing a community by maybe providing information into a remote community on an emergency, things like that, local news, you wouldn't support government supporting any of that at all?
The government should not pay media companies, period. And then if you start getting into things like, oh, well, what about Indigenous programming? The CBC spends a fraction of a percentage point on their Indigenous programming.
Right.
So they pay their executive bonuses more.
How do we deliver media, or I would say news? Because there's a difference sometimes between what a journalist may put on just general broadcasting for information, the weather, for example. How would you propose getting that? Canada's such a large country. How would you propose getting that information out there to all Canadians that maybe don't have access to the internet because of where they are, and they would have access to radio? How would you propose that people get that information?
Like an emergency basis?
Just on a regular basis, community information.
So
do you think government should be supporting getting information out to rural, small communities that normally wouldn't have enough capacity through a business approach to support a local media agency?
So again, we're talking about the behemoth that is the CBC,
No, I'm
$1.4 billion. And just to be clear, you're whittling it down to this tiny little keyhole of getting emergency information to people in the north.
You said you just disagree with all
please.
to media.
Sorry, Chair.
The time is up, Mr. Cotto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My questions will be for Ms. Sim. In your experience, what has been the triggering point, or rather, when did the viewership at CBC started to go down? Is it 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? When does it date back to? And was there a particular set of circumstances that led to the majority of Anglophone viewership in Canada to give up and decide not to tune into CBC? And is it maybe the impact of the American outlets? I don't know, because I do not know much about the Anglophone market. That's why I'm asking the question to you.
I'm sorry that I don't speak French well enough to answer you in French. That's a very good question. Generally speaking, in my experience as a journalist, it's been declining steadily and then rapidly. But I do not have the hard data going back, say, 20 years of the CBC's viewership. I would have to go back and get that for you. We only have current data on their viewership.
If we are to talk about CBC programming, viewership is a disaster. There's no other way of putting it. Compared to Francophone Canada, they are the leaders in the Francophone market, but CBC is not the leader in the Anglophone market. They could be the reference for promoting culture, for Canadian experience. With all the money that's been invested, they get some shows from the US, but Canadian shows or programs are not being exported. They're not used elsewhere, and CBC is producing some content, and unfortunately, no one is tuning in. Why?
Why are people not watching the CBC?
Yeah.
That's a great question. We do know, again, hard data. We do know that generally speaking, trust in journalism is at a really all-time low. I think it's 61 or 62% of Canadians now believe that journalists are saying things that they know to be false or are gross exaggerations. As a journalist, that was shocking to me, because as a journalist, you try to make sure that you don't even get somebody's name wrong, that you don't accidentally get a date wrong. But now we have the majority of Canadians distrusting journalists to the extent that they feel they're being deliberately misled. So I'm not sure why people are tuning out. I will also point out to you, I think you made a reference to them importing programming from other countries and airing it on the CBC. Very interestingly, again, Murdoch Mysteries is their top-rated fiction show for entertainment that we can tell. That's not produced by the CBC. And then I tried to find the top 15 shows, not news, just shows. And they ranked 16th, and it was the Great British Bake Off, which is obviously produced by the UK. It wasn't even produced by CBC. So that was another import.
You were saying, Ms. Sims, that you were against funding the corporation, but when I go on the website of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, I don't see any outcries coming from you about the subsidies given to oil and gas companies in Alberta. Because you're against corporate welfare, you must be scandalized by the billions provided at the federal level to oil and gas companies who make billions of dollars. I'd like to hear you on that.
Welfare. Period. It doesn't matter what company it is, we're opposed to it. And in fact, if you do go to our website, taxpayer.com, you will see several articles where we are taking that to task, no matter what company it is.
I see a lot of references to the carbon tax, but I don't see a lot of remarks against the subsidies provided by the government to pipelines and oil and gas. But because that's not the subject of study of today, you said, well, you referred to journalists misleading Canadians. So you work with media outlets such as True North, Rebel News, and the like. So would you say that these outlets are independent? Are they rigorous media companies? Would their quality of journalism, does it compare to mainstream media such as CBC and others? What's your opinion on this type of outlets and journalism?
I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you, but I'll try my best to answer. So once again, we're here to point out the cost of the CBC, that nearly nobody is watching it, and that journalists shouldn't be paid by the media.
I can repeat my question. I was asking for your opinion on media outlets with which you work regularly. It's online. It's for everyone to see, True North and Rebel News and others. So my question is, do you consider these outlets as reliable in terms of independent information and quality information compared to what's being put out by traditional outlets such as CBC, Global News, and CTV, for instance?
A short answer, please.
Sorry, ma'am, through the chair. I think that is a personal opinion. I have worked with outstanding journalists from all outlets, actually. So it doesn't matter if it's True North or Rebel or Western Standard, or in fact, the CBC or CTV or Global. So it's been both independent and alternative media, which is largely personally or directly funded, self-funded, or in some cases also speaking with the CBC in earnest about a lot of issues, and outlets like CTV and Global. So there's good journalists in all of those newsrooms, but they shouldn't be paid by the government.
Do you think the CBC respects the Canadian taxpayer?
Well, with respect to the chair, I think that's a matter of opinion. A lot of people say they may not like the programming on the CBC, and perhaps that is why they're choosing to no longer watch it. But from the Canadian taxpayer's perspective, it's again, there are those three main points. This cost of the CBC, the fact that nearly nobody is watching it anymore, and that journalists should not be paid by the government is what is really important here. As far as their opinions on their programming, whether news or fiction or entertainment, we would leave that up to Canadians.
If I could add to that quick. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation has an ongoing legal challenge against the CBC. So I filed an access to information request trying to seek how much of that bonus, the $18 million in bonuses that they hand out, went to their senior executives, the senior executive team. They're stonewalling the release of that information, claiming that it's personal information. Well, when it's taxpayers' money, taxpayers have every right to know how much the CBC is allocating to its senior executive bonuses. So we did launch that legal challenge, but I certainly don't think that shows much respect for Canadian taxpayers. The fact that we pay the bills, but they say we don't get to know how much they're spending on senior executive bonuses.
Yeah, so what I hear from Canadians in reaction to the current CEO, Ms. Catherine Tait, appearing before this committee, and also last week's appearance by the incoming CEO, Madame Bouchard, is a concern of that there's no real answers given in terms of any sort of accountability. Like at this committee, we can point to ad revenue dropping, viewership dropping, trust in the CBC dropping, and no sense of, okay, we've got to do something differently. Instead, what we get is them lining up and saying we just need hundreds of millions of more dollars. And I do think that has created an impression, in my view, accurately among a lot of Canadians, that there's just not a lot of respect for the taxpayer and the fact that there needs to be some value delivered in exchange for all of that money being given to the organization. What's your view on that?
I find it comes down to accountability, which is something that the Taxpayers Federation is always pushing for. And the fact that we saw the CEO, who again, I will point out, makes about $500,000 a year. The bonus she's entitled to is up to more than what the average Canadian family earns in an entire year in all of their paychecks. So the idea that they were not being accountable is deeply concerning to taxpayers. But we don't believe that this is fixable. We don't think that they should throw more money at the CBC. The very idea is astonishing because right now they're getting $1.4 billion. And again, to put that into perspective, that's the grocery bills of 85,000 families for an entire year. It is an outrageous amount of money. So the idea of throwing more money at them while they're being less and less accountable, we just don't think that's acceptable.
One quick point to add. So the CBC doesn't publish a sunshine list, but at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, we file access to information requests and we do that homework for them. Since 2015, the amount of CBC employees that are earning six figures and up has increased by 231%. So we're looking at the bonuses, which is 132 million in bonuses at the CBC since 2015. The six-figure salaries at the CBC have increased by 231%. And then we hear them come back time and time again, crying poor and asking for even more money. And I think from the perspective of a lot of Canadian taxpayers, it's enough is enough.
I think it's about 1,000 people they've added to the Sunshine List.
An extra 1,000 people on their Sunshine List.
Yes.
Well, we've heard today also from this organization, Friends of Canadian Media, another ask for more money and that more money is going to solve all of the problems. They've also said, though, that they're unhappy with pretty much every prime minister in my lifetime has not given them enough money. It sounds to me like this is a hustle. It's an insatiable appetite. There's always going to be an ask for more. There's never going to be enough money. The more they fail, the more they need money. It's a circle that never stops. Do you think that's a fair interpretation?
So to be nice off the top, we do really appreciate what the Friends of the Public Broadcaster or Canadian Media said when they said this decision for bonuses is deeply out of touch and unbefitting of our national public broadcaster.
30 seconds.
We agree with that. But again, the idea of just putting more money into government-funded media is just the opposite of what taxpayers want. We want media to be privately funded through willing donations or subscriptions or a give, send, go. However you give money to the media of your choice is how this should play out. The notion of just giving more taxpayers' money into government-funded media, that is just not going to work.
For journalism to work, it must stand on its own 2 feet. It's the only way it works.
Ms. Sims, if I could start with you. I share your concern about the state of news and broadcast media in this country. And I'm wondering if you might share with me your views on foreign interference or foreign ownership of Canadian media. Do you think that's a reasonable way out of this to let foreign buyers buy Canadian news outlets and media outlets?
That's kind of getting a little bit away from what we're here to point out about the funding of the CBC.
No, but I'm asking. I get to ask the question.
Excuse me, I think I consider that question to be in order. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'm concerned that I'm giving my opinion about who should fund government who should fund media outside of government. We believe that Canadians should pay for the media that they want to watch, by and large, and that private companies should raise money through ads, through subscriptions, through donations. Like, for example, here we have Blacklock's Reporter, which has a subscription by year, and they do outstanding journalism, and it's 2 hardworking Canadian journalists. And so whether or not you get, money from outside, I don't know. I guess it would be up to the private company.
Yeah, I think there's a conversation to be had about this. You have said, and I hear you loud and clear, that there should be no government subsidies, period, and there should certainly be no funding of subsidies to the media in Canada. Are you concerned about the level of subsidy that Post Media gets from the federal government that they have now built into their business plan, and to the fact that they are taking Canadian taxpayer dollars and also paying their bonuses to executives that are probably 100, in some cases 10 or 15 or 20 times larger than what CBC pays its executives?
So to be clear, there's two separate streams here that we're talking about. There's the CBC, which is 1.4 billion.
Yeah.
And then I think what you're talking about there is often referred to as the media bailout, if you can call it that. Roughly 500 million. Is that what you're talking about?
No,
outside
there's a
CBC?
series of different, if you read Post Media's annual report, they disclose that government subsidy, a variety of different kinds, is actually part of their now business plan.
Yes.
Does that concern you?
Yes, very much
Okay.
so. It concerns us. To be clear, it works out sometimes, depending on
Yeah.
the media outlet, roughly $30,000 per employee of media company outside of the CBC. That is highly alarming. One, taxpayers shouldn't be paying for that. And two, journalists should not be paid by the government.
Did you mentioned that you've done some work with True North, right?
I've been a journalist for most of my adult life. I do hits and media interviews with all outlets.
Are you concerned that True North took government subsidy? Have you expressed that same concern about True North?
No media company should take government
Including
subsidy,
True North.
period. Any of them.
Do you believe, so you've said you need to defund the CBC, and I want to be very clear. When you talk about the CBC, you're talking about CBC, Radio-Canada, the entire thing, correct?
Yes, $1.4 billion.
The entire thing.
Should not be going to that company.
So every French language broadcast, everything in Quebec, every dollar, I just want to be absolutely clear, every dollar of federal money that goes to the CBC and Radio-Canada should be taken away.
I will point out that the CBC, to its credit, does raise some of its own money.
Right.
So I think it's around, I'd have to go back and check, it's around $400 million around there, maybe even $500 million. That's nothing to sneeze at. That's an awful lot of money that they're generating on their own.
Right. But
And
you would say
perhaps they
all,
could
but you would
produce
say
their own
all federal
programming.
money, all federal subsidy for CBC and Radio-Canada should disappear.
No taxpayers' money should
No
go to
taxpayer
that
money.
company.
Okay. So taxpayer money would be government subsidy, correct?
Sure, whatever
Okay.
you want to call it. It comes
Okay.
from the taxpayer. It doesn't come from the government, but it's issued by the government.
So if we dig into this a little bit more deeply, where there are markets which are called news deserts, and there is no ability for news to get to those places, and we have coverage concerns in this country, how do you respond to the fact that there are populations of this country, if the CBC were to disappear, or to be defunded to the point where they focused entirely on those things that were entirely profitable, which is largely going to be urban and those types of things? What would you do for those communities? How would you ensure that the communities in rural Canada, Indigenous communities, Francophone communities in places like Vancouver got access to news coverage and to media coverage that would inform them?
Okay. With respect to the chair, you mentioned Indigenous programming, and I wanted to share this with you. So according to the CBC's 2022-2023 annual report, it spent $6.4 million on its Indigenous services.
Mm-hmm.
That is about 0.5% of its budget. Just one
my
moment,
question is,
sir. I
how
just
would you
wanted
get
to to it.
how would you get coverage to those communities? My question isn't just about whether or not the CBC did this. My question is, if the CBC money were all to disappear, where would you go and how would you get news into these communities, particularly Francophone communities in language minority places like British Columbia, Indigenous communities that are doing this programming? It's not a question of the dollars for me. The dollars are important, but my question to you is, how would you actually deliver that programming? That's what I'm concerned about.
Well, that's perhaps something that Canadian Heritage could figure out, maybe even around this council table, this committee
Thank you.
table.
I think we have ended your 5-minute round, Mr. Nur Mohammed. Thank you very much. Very, finish your sentence and let's.
Madam Chair, appreciate that. I just did want to point out that the spending with Indigenous programming, the CBC spent more than double on its bonuses alone than it did on its Indigenous programming. So it has a lot of work to do there.
Yes, it does. Anyways, on that note, I will leave it at that, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.